OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are becoming nearly elite at getting downhill and getting to the rim and scoring at the rim.
I think ultimately this is going to be a fork in the road moment for this team. When Jalen Brunson returns, there are sort of two paths they can go. They can return to the way they played before Jalen Brunson got hurt, or they can go down this new road where Jalen Brunson is a part of something bigger.
I think my biggest takeaway from this time, and hopefully for Knicks fans, is that this team is good enough to compete at the highest level. And we've seen evidence, given how well they've sustained without their very best player.
One overwhelmingly unequivocal good thing is there's no way the fallout from this season can be roster construction based. I think that's what we've learned from this, is this roster is good enough. The pieces are there. It's about putting the pieces together.
Maybe people believe we often sound so negative, quote unquote. We spend so much time in particular with problem identification. If you can't accurately identify the problem, then you can't identify an effective solution. If you think the problem is they don't have enough talent, despite the evidence that we're seeing to the contrary, then that's going to lead you down a road of completely different solutions.
Honestly, actually, I thought that was one of the most thought-provoking and wonderful monologues that you've delivered all season. That was perfect.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host Geoff. Geoff. We've been away for a little bit, man. We've been talking about other teams besides the Knicks, but we're coming back to talk about the New York Knickerbockers. Hopefully people have been dialed into every game, because there's a lot of insights and takeaways that I think are going to be really important for the Knicks for when Jalen Brunson returns, which in my opinion is probably going to be very soon. And when I say soon, I mean, I think he's almost definitely going to play at least 4 more games. For those who don't know, Jalen Brunson's played 61 games so far this season. He needs to get us to 65 to qualify for an all-NBA season. The Knicks are going to get him 4 more games played. So I think he's going to be back most likely, either the weekend coming up, one of those 2 games on the weekend, could be the Sunday game against the Phoenix Suns, which would allow him to kind of play 4 out of the last 5 games of the season, which I think is most likely. So Brunson's probably coming back either way pretty soon, and it seems likely that he's going to play us a handful of games before the playoffs. What do you think about, Geoff? Normally I throw it over to you. I say, Geoff, where do you want to lead us? And I know we have a lot to talk about with, Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and their outburst in the time that Brunson hasn't been playing. What do you think about starting, just from a general sense, in how the Knicks have played in this post-Brunson injury situation? Just kind of an overview of how they've looked in that time period. How have you felt about them? And do you think there are any takeaways that the Knicks should take with them for when Brunson comes back and the playoffs begin?
This feels like a trap, right? Like, no, I think the business should go as usual, and they should go back to the way it was when Brunson was back. No. So they've gone 7-5 without him, if you exclude the Lakers game that he got hurt at the end of, which I think is reasonable. And I think there's been a lot of good. I think that there are certain games where, if anything, they haven't leaned into the good enough, and they've kind of tried to make, whether it's Mikal or OG Anunoby, they've had these stretches where they've tried to turn one of their perimeter guys into Jalen Brunson and been like, here, run the offense, just do everything. But I think the best stretches that the team's had in the last 12 games have been those where they're getting production from everybody. And I think that more than anything, as we discussed, we discussed this right when Brunson got hurt. We were like, there's an opportunity here for them to shift to more of an egalitarian offense. Shout out to the person who said I mispronounced that on the last Knicks episode. I think they're
always on you about mispronunciations, Geoff. This is what I noticed.
It's your fault. It's your fault. You started with Wemby the Yama Man, and it just went downhill ever since then. Everyone's just looking to
classic.
But yeah, I think this was an opportunity, and I think if I had to give the Knicks a grade on how well they've capitalized on this opportunity, I'd give them close to an A. I think that where they've gotten to with Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, I mean, one of the things you said that I think is going to turn out to look really smart is you were like, if they could guarantee that Jalen Brunson was going to come back from this injury, you could make the argument that this injury was a blessing in disguise because they're going to get their most important player back, and they're going to have this sort of ramp up where Bridges and OG Anunoby are their confidence is building, their imprint on the offense is growing, and now Jalen Brunson is returning to something where he doesn't have to shoulder the whole burden. He can hopefully fill in. And in my opinion, and I don't know if you disagree with this, that's what the best version of this team looks like. It is Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns not only being surrounded by all this space and this shooting and this defense and all these other good things that some of these guys do, but also being a part of that. Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns are both elite shooters. They can elevate other players too. It doesn't have to just be a one-way street. So, I mean, obviously the jury's still out on what the team's going to look like when Jalen Brunson returns, but I think ultimately this is going to be a fork in the road moment for this team. When Jalen Brunson returns, there are sort of two paths they can go. They can return to the way they played before Jalen Brunson got hurt, and we saw what that looked like, how the starting lineup performed with that, and how the overall team performed with that. Or they can go down this new road where Jalen Brunson is a part of something bigger, and I think that will approximate what their overall ceiling is more. So those are my thoughts, and I think that's what we've learned about the Knicks without Brunson.
Yeah, I think that's all really spot on. The one thing I would say is that, you mentioned how this could be a blessing in disguise, and the operative word there is could, because if it goes to that first option that you mentioned, reverting back to the status quo without, when Jalen Brunson is on the court, where he is kind of the leader of this heliocentric offense, I think it could be a net negative for the team, because it's one thing if you're Mikal and you're OG and some of the other guys who have had opportunities without Brunson, and you just never had those opportunities and things continue to go along the status quo as they always have been. It's another thing to have had those opportunities, performed well, the team's performed well, and then you revert back to how things were before you had those opportunities. I think that'd be kind of a worse situation and could cause some problems, from a synergy and not just on-court synergy kind of perspective. But I do want to say
the thing is, actually, before you just expand on that.
Yeah.
If they do that, if they revert to the way they played, and the playoffs go as they probably would go if the opponents stay healthy. And I mean, look, we'll talk about it when it comes, but if they play Milwaukee without Dame, that series has to be a win for the Knicks. That can't be anything.
Not just a win. Not just a win. I think it's got to be 5 games, something like that.
It's got to be a decisive win. And that's not disrespect to Giannis, who we both think is incredible, but that team is just poorly coached, and they don't have very much beyond that. The whole basis of that team is Dame and Giannis's theoretical synergy, and without half of that, it's just, we saw what it looked like. It's just not very good. But anyways, and then they lose to Boston in the second round. If the playoffs look like that, and it looks like it has the last couple seasons where it's Jalen Brunson carrying this insane usage and kind of underperformances around him, I think we've seen too much at this point for the narrative to be, well, Jalen Brunson just needs more help. I think that ship sailed. I don't think that. I think that is one. I think whatever it does to the team chemistry, the locker room that you were bringing up, one overwhelmingly unequivocal good thing is there's no way the fallout from this season can be roster construction based. And I think that's a win. I think that's what we've learned from this roster is good enough. The pieces are there. It's about putting the pieces together.
Man, I'm smiling so hard because you totally just completely took exactly what I was about to say, which is not bad. As long as it gets out there, it's good. But I entirely agree with you. I think my biggest takeaway from this time, and hopefully for Knicks fans, is that this team is good enough to compete at the highest level. And we've seen evidence, given how well they've sustained without their very best player. And for a lot of the time, without who I think is their fifth best player in Miles McBride. Let's look at some of this data. We have the data. Let's look at some of this data on pre-injury, pre-Brunson injury versus post-Brunson injury. You mentioned them being 7-5. People may say, oh, it's a little underwhelming. Their record was so much better with Brunson. Let's look at some very specifics about that data. So before Brunson's injury, the Knicks were 6th in point differential, plus 5.4 per 100 possessions. Post-Brunson injury over these 12 games, do you know what the Knicks differential is, point differential?
Off the top of my head, I don't, so wow me.
Plus 5.9. So about the same, slightly better, but over that sample, I would say it's a negligible difference in terms of their overall performance. Point differential is a better indicator of how good a team is than their actual raw record because of, variability and chance and luck factors and other things. So I would say I would definitely lean on point differential over record. And I think the Knicks have been just as good in this short stretch of 12 games without Jalen Brunson as they have been with Jalen Brunson. And again, like I mentioned, it's not just it's not replacing, or I didn't mention this, but I should mention, it's not replacing Jalen Brunson with a guy who's not as good as Jalen Brunson. It's just losing Jalen Brunson. It is not like, oh, they got a slightly worse version of a guy who can approximate what Brunson does, but he's not quite as good. Oh, we lost Jalen Brunson, but then got Julius Randle. It's just minus Jalen Brunson, and they've played about the same kind of basketball. On top of losing, again, who I think is their fifth best player in Deuce McBride, have lost him for a part of that time as well. About the same in terms of differential. The difference is they were 5th in offensive rating with Brunson, 17th in defensive rating without Brunson, 15th in offensive rating, and 7th in defensive rating. So lost 10 spots in offense, but gained 10 spots in defense, which makes a ton of sense. That feels consistent. But if we dive even deeper into some of these numbers, we just look at how their offense has changed and how they've been able to at least sustain a top half of the league offense without their best player, not potentially one of the best offensive players in the game, and especially one of the best offensive guards in the game. They went from, Geoff, 22nd in passes per game and 1st in average dribbles per touch. So that's every time someone touches the ball, how much do they dribble it? They went from 22nd in passes per game and 1st in average dribbles per touch to 9th in passes per game, of course, and 17th in average dribbles per touch. So we're talking about a team who was an extremely ball dominant team when the person has the ball. And in most cases, this is Jalen Brunson. They are dribbling it a ton before it moves on to the next player. This has gone from the first team, so the worst at being egalitarian, to 17th, so about middle of the road in terms of average dribbles per touch, and other stats like assists, potential assists, other stats like average seconds per touch. All of these stats changed dramatically with Jalen Brunson off the court. And that, I think, is how they've been able to maintain their at least being a top half of the league offensively while having lost their best offensive player and not replace him with anyone. So what do you think about that style? Do you think that style is the best way to go? Because I don't necessarily just think that. Like, I think it's contingent on the opponent. I think it's contingent on how defenses are guarding Brunson. I am not, and people know this about me, and maybe it feels inconsistent with some of my other positions, but I don't think it is. I am not like an anti-heliocentric guy. I think that you can have one heliocentric offensive player who can completely dominate a game. I don't think the Knicks are well set up to have that dynamic because they don't surround that player with elite spacing, given that there's so many minutes when Josh Hart is on the court and Mitchell Robinson is on the court. So I don't really think the Knicks are really well set up for a heliocentric offense. And for that reason, because they're not perfectly set up for that dynamic to really thrive as the best it could, I do think that they need to have a more egalitarian offense, have more passing, definitely not be first in average dribbles per touch, definitely not be second in average seconds per touch. All of those factors, I think, are not good for this team, the way that they're constructed and the lineups that they roll out there. So what do you think about that? Do you think that is the case? And if you were to give a prediction, how do you think it's going to go when Jalen Brunson comes back? And maybe that's also a segue into us talking about how these wings have performed in the absence of Jalen Brunson to make up the slack.
Yeah, I think this is somewhere where we kind of diverge, both in well, maybe not in multiple areas, but definitely in the on the topic of the personnel, because I personally don't think that if you gave Jalen Brunson maximal space, like, and everybody knows what we think the answer there is, just replacing Josh Hart with Deuce McBride in the starting lineup. So imagining that lineup, and you have Jalen Brunson running what people would refer to as a heliocentric offense, which is just a ton of high screens with him dictating where the ball goes, whether he's shooting or whether he's spraying the ball around. I think that this is an area where you would see a massive difference between a guy like Jalen Brunson and a guy like Tyrese Halliburton or a guy like LaMelo Ball. Like, if you put Halliburton or Ball in that spot surrounded by those same Knicks players, I do think that would be the peak version of this Knicks team. I think that their size advantage and their passing abilities would really shine. And because of all the space they'd be operating in, again, they both, especially when it comes to LaMelo, but even the Pacers with Miles Turner at center, they both operate in theoretically worse spacing environments compared to what the Knicks would have. And for people out there, we still haven't seen it. Like, we still haven't seen how ridiculous this spacing environment would be with Deuce McBride and OG Anunoby and Karl-Anthony Towns. Guys, Mikal Bridges would be the worst spacer in this lineup. Mikal Bridges would be the worst shooter. You got think about what Halliburton operates in and how ridiculously open that floor looks. He has Pascal Siakam. He has Aaron Nesmith. He has guys that aren't nearly as good as shooters as Deuce McBride, Karl-Anthony Towns, and OG Anunoby are. These are three of the best shooters in the league off the catch who you cannot give a hint of airspace to. And so, in my opinion, what we'd end up seeing a lot of if you replaced Hart with McBride, I just think that Brunson would keep using these switches to force mismatches for himself. I think he's a good passer, but I don't think he has all of the extra angles given his size in terms of making those skip passes when he gets blitzed, when he penetrates in the paint and he forces one of those rotations. I don't think he makes those passes nearly as well as Halliburton or Ball. So I think the best offense for Brunson is a little bit of a mix. And to the point you made, I think you need to bake in some of that team offense. I think that needs to be baked into the offense as opposed to just putting him in space and assuming it will come as a result of the space. I think that if Brunson is given the keys and it's just like, all right, we gave you the space, now let's see what you can do with it. I think Brunson would be amazing, but I think he'd be amazing mostly as a scorer. And you'd see some of the best individual offense ever, and the team would benefit from it. But I still don't think it would be the maximal version of this team with, like we've seen lately, Bridges, OG Anunoby, these guys thriving at the level they would if maybe team offense was baked into the scheme a bit more from the preset.
Yeah, I hear that. I think there's a ton of merit to that. To your point, Jalen Brunson and one of my favorite passing metrics is called passing creation quality. So how good are the looks that your teammates are getting off of your passes? Jalen Brunson is down around 67th percentile in passing creation quality, which is not really going to cut it for an elite kind of passing point guard. He should be creating better looks for his teammates. That being said, as far as the variety of passes that he can make, if we look at another metric called passing versatility, which is measuring just that, he's around the 92nd percentile. So that is very good. And then if we look at passing creation volume, so how many looks is he creating through his passing, he's at 98th percentile. And so that is more of a reflective of sort of running a heliocentric offense already. My view is that if he's running as good an offense as he is with the lack of spacing, why would it not improve significantly with better spacing? Like I don't see an argument why it wouldn't, especially given some of his ability, his versatility of his passing. And I agree, like, what he'd probably do with the spacing is just become a better and more efficient scorer. But I also think that would be totally fine and would be great for their offense. So I can
to be clear, I think the team would be better. I just think we're always talking about what the ceiling version of this team is.
Yeah.
And I think that given the limitations of the lineup construction that we think they're definitely going to go with and the player, I think that the ceiling version of this team is going to lie in more of what we've seen lately from the Knicks, these built-in schemes that incentivize and almost create passes for the players as opposed to expecting the players to do it themselves.
I totally hear that. So I'm curious what our audience thinks. Does our audience kind of view things more that way? I think that they probably do. I think most people would be more on your side with some of this more egalitarian offense. And I think that that's how the majority of people think for different reasons. Maybe not your reasons, but I think most people kind of think a more ball movement heavy style that doesn't necessarily completely depend on the greatness of an individual player to kind of create for his teammates is more advantageous. I would say, my middle ground is just, it really depends on what the defense is doing. So if the defense is putting Dyson Daniels on you, then yeah, I'm in total agreement. Maybe we shouldn't have a heliocentric offense running through one of the most elite perimeter defenders in the world. That probably is not a good, way to attack that defense. But a good way to attack that defense would be for, your guys, your secondary, your tertiary scorers, guys like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, to attack weaker defenders with better space and with more opportunities. And we have seen that these two guys are completely thriving in this situation where they've been asked to take on more of the burden. It's really interesting. We've known for a long time that OG Anunoby has wanted to have a bigger offensive role and be more of an initiator, be more of a scorer, has believed that he has the skill set to do so. I hadn't always been a believer. I'm kind of like, that's great, OG. Please just shoot threes and play a crazy defense, and I'll be happy with you. I don't need you to create anything. But he's showing that he can absolutely do it. He's been incredible since Brunson has been out, now scoring 23 points per game on 60% true shooting, to go with over three stocks per game, so steals and blocks. And his scoring has been even better of late over the last 9 or so games. He's been on a complete binge. And then Tommy Beer had posted on Twitter that OG's drives per game had gone from 5.1 to 8.3 in the 12 games without Brunson. And Mikal's had gone from 5.2 to 11.5 in the 12 games without Brunson. Mikal in particular, we know how dreadful his foul drawing was before the Brunson injury, something that we've harped on a ton here. Like, what is going on? Post-Brunson injury, pre-Brunson injury, he was at 1.8 fouls drawn per 100 possessions. Now, post-Brunson injury, he's at 3.7 fouls drawn per 100 possessions. So he's doubled his rate of drawing fouls, despite still having a high mid-range heavy diet of shots and not necessarily still getting all the way to the rim. What do you think about these two wings, their play, without Brunson, being able to pick up the slack, again, keeping this offense at above or around middle of the road offense, a top 15 offense in the league, while having lost their best offensive player? It's, in my opinion, it's very impressive, and also increasing your defensive efficiency 10 spots in the league. What do you think about these two wings and how they played?
I think the thing that stood out to me the most is OG's just overall stamina and endurance. And like you just alluded to, the fact that he's ramped up his offensive usage and his offensive role, and it hasn't affected his defense at all. He was everywhere in that Blazers game, just absolutely everywhere. Just if you tried to make a pass to his guy, you better have been crisp with that pass, because he was jumping passing lanes. His hands were just everywhere. He's an amazing basketball player. I have to be honest, though. I'm moved, obviously, but we knew that these guys were really good basketball players to some extent, especially OG. Obviously, to start this season, it was, what's wrong with Mikal? But I think even early on, you and I were like, Mikal Bridges didn't forget how to play basketball. This is just about how he's being used and what his role is within the offense. So, to me, this is really good, and it's helping the vibes of the fan base and what's going on in the locker room. It's really nice that they've been able to maintain some semblance of competency without Jalen Brunson. But to me, it's always going to come back to how much of this are they going to be able to, and how much is the team going to let them carry this over when they're whole? Because it's all about competing for a championship. And look, I'm going to bring this up again, and I'm sure our fans are kind of sick of this, or our audience. Jesus, that was pompous. Our audience, I'm sure our audience is, yeah, right? Our fans, they're out there wearing our shirt. Who the fuck do I think I am? I'm sure our audience is sick of me making this analogy, but I think it's really, really important. There was that one game a few weeks ago, or maybe even months ago at this point, when both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum missed, and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard became the first Celtics teammates to score 40 points in the same game. And I thought this game was really, really emblematic of what's going on in Boston, not because they both scored 40 points, but because Pritchard and White, sure, they can scale up a little bit, and if Tatum and Brown weren't there, I'm sure their average points per game would go up. But when Tatum and Brown are there, they're still pretty much peaking impact-wise. And this is a really, really important difference, because impact isn't about counting stats. It's not about – I'm not asking – when Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby, when Jalen Brunson comes back, I'm not asking Bridges and OG Anunoby to keep scoring 25 points a game. To me, that wouldn't be them being the best versions of themselves. And so I just want to get out in front of that sort of difference, because the best teams find a way to maximize all of their players. And so if Jalen Brunson comes back and Mikal Bridges is scoring 18 points a game, I don't want people to think that me, and I don't think XJ are immediately going to be like, oh, see, he's not averaging 25 points a game anymore. That must mean he's not the best version of himself. There are ways for these guys to be maximized without putting up the counting stats. The counting stats they're putting up right now are almost just sort of like somebody has to. Jalen Brunson isn't on the court anymore. Somebody's got to put up these points, and I'm not trying to take away from how impressive it is, but I just want it to be clear that there are ways to bridge this divide, and for the Knicks to have Brunson back and OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges to still be almost as involved as they are now and maintain this consistency, this rhythm, and do it in a way that still allows Jalen Brunson to be the top dog. So for me, that is going to be everything for this team. If they, I'm just going to keep harping on this. If they go back to a potential world where it's like, oh, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are sort of playing every other game, and it looks like almost they've disappeared for stretches, that's not going to be the best version of this. And I think that we're learning that when these two are consistent parts of the offense, they're going to consistently provide for you. And that needs to be the main takeaway for this whole team, because this team construction is so brilliant. It's so good. Totally different subject. I think Leon Rose is probably the most underrated executive in the entire league. This is a joke. This is a joke what they've put together. They should be viewed like the Thunder and the Celtics. This is insane. They've got Wright as like their 13th man, a guy who can just suit up and play consistent minutes and help you on both ends of the court. Like, Landry Shamet is good at basketball. We've been saying it all year. As long as he didn't forget how to shoot, this guy can be your 9th or 10th man. Cameron Payne is having a wonderful year. Tyler Kolek, whatever. I'm not one of those, Kolek needs to be the backup all year, but he immediately is able to help you. Deuce McBride, do they probably need to get another wing or two? Yeah, probably they need to get a little bit more size. I'm not saying this is a perfectly built team, But insofar as the combination of depth and star talent, this is an amazing team. And like this idea that I can't believe looking back in November, there were people who were like, well, what is Tibbs supposed to do? Mikal has to play 44 minutes a game. They have nobody else. No, they had plenty of other options, and there were plenty of other ways to get to where they are now. And a big part of that to me is the fact that Bridges and OG Anunoby and Josh Hart and Deuce McBride are amazing 3rd through 6th best players on your team. Or if you think Mitch at his best is close to Hart or Deuce, third through 7th best players on your team. And the Knicks need to do everything they can do to make sure that when Jalen Brunson is back and he's the head of your ship, that these guys' impacts are still close to the best or the maximized as possible.
Yeah, and I largely agree with that, at least definitely thematically as far as maximizing those guys. I think that we both agree, and everyone knows who's listened to this podcast before, that the way to win in the NBA consistently is to maximize all of your players or as much as your players as you can at one time. And that's going to lead to the best outcome, the best net overall outcome for your team. They don't consistently do that, though. We know that. And even in this case, I don't think that they are necessarily being maximized given some of the lineup constructions that we've seen run out without Jalen Brunson. But despite that, they are still playing exceptionally well. To me, the formula really needs to be what they did in the first half of the first Oklahoma City Thunder game. And that in my opinion, both Brunson to do what he does and both OG and Mikal to be really heavily involved and have a major impact on both ends of the court. What they did that I thought was so great was going for early offense with their wings sort of kind of primarily operating from in the paint. Those guys would run down and get a seal early or try to get post-ups before the defense was set, and they were scoring pretty much at will. They would create early in the shot clock, and if things got later in the shot clock, then you would see more Jalen Brunson kind of go into his bag and different isolations, looking for switches, pick and rolls with Jalen Brunson. And then you have opportunities to do pick and pops, the Karl-Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson pick and pop, pick and roll. You can, when Mitchell Robinson is on the court, you have the Brunson, Mitchell Robinson pick and roll. There are so many things you can go to. You can go to, a pick and roll with Jalen Brunson as the screener for guys like Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart, which creates this really dangerous pop threat. So that allows these guys to really get downhill. And as we've seen, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are becoming somewhat nearly elite at getting downhill and getting to the rim and scoring at the rim. I mean, Mikal Bridges has been exceptional all year in transition. His transition, shot making, and scoring ability has been through the roof. And OG Anunoby has just gotten nothing but better. He's somehow figured out how to utilize his strength, his physicality, his length, all of those gifts that he has that he deploys so perfectly well defensively. He's figured out how to deploy those gifts as well on the offensive end, and especially in transition, and especially in early offense, when he can kind of get to the rim and have one guy, oftentimes a smaller player, on him and really dominate that player and get to the rim. And so I just feel like they have the capacity to do this, and it just requires different approaches, and some of what they've done for sure without Jalen Brunson in terms of the ball movement. But I also think early offense is a way that you can get those wings involved early. And if not, you can kind of fall back into your Jalen Brunson scoring option, which is a really efficient and highly effective scoring option, as we've seen him anchor this team into the top 5 offense in the league. So I think you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, if you play in a bit more of an up-tempo style, as they did in that first half of the first Oklahoma City Thunder game. Now, do I think we're going to see that? No, I don't think we're going to see that. And people know that maybe I'm very pessimistic, maybe I'm jaded, whatever the case may be, but I just don't believe that we're going to see some of these, I wouldn't even venture as far as to call them innovations, but some of these different deployment options from Tibbs and the coaching staff, because we haven't. And continuously over and over again, as self-involved as this might sound, I'm just correct over and over again because we don't see these things happen. So I would love to be wrong here, and for them to kind of incorporate the things that they've learned without Brunson to more give a more heavy focus on their wings, especially in early offense, play more similar to how we saw when they really manhandled the Oklahoma City Thunder in the first half of that game. But I don't think we're going to see it, and that is my concern. I think that we may see some fool's gold here where the Knicks get the Thunder, not the Thunder, the Bucks in the first round and really dispatch of them in 5 games, 6 if could get to 6, but I think they'll probably get rid of them in 5 games. And then we'll see them move on to a much tougher opponent. And I don't think the Knicks are necessarily going to have the schemes, the approaches, the philosophy, the practice reps in playing in these particular styles to get it done in the second round of the playoffs. So that is my concern for the Knicks kind of moving forward. But do I think they have the ammunition to do it? Absolutely. And I think this stretch has really been strong evidence that they do. And we'll see the way it goes.
The Buck series could kind of be like winning the series is going to be worse for that team than whoever loses, because like if the Bucks, whoever loses that series is going to fire their coach. The losing team's coach is not surviving that series.
Yeah.
And just watching that Bucks game, I mean, I don't know what Bucks fan is going to stumble upon this episode. That was one of the most brutal experiences. I mean, that was atrocious. That was a team not even trying. They called timeout, a frustrated timeout, and came out of it and ran a play for Giannis to take like a 19-footer with 18 seconds left on the shot clock. That team is so far behind in every single way. It's actually a testament to how great Giannis is that the team is not even, I know the bottom of the East is bad, but that they've even been as successful as they've been so far because they have good players. Gary, like looking beyond Dame and Giannis, like Gary Trent Jr. and AJ Green and Brook Lopez, and they're going to get Bobby Portis back, who's fine. Kuzma's playing a different sport, so I don't know what he is doing half the time. But yeah, I mean, the Knicks are likely going to beat them, and then not. To your point, there's a good chance not maximize this group of players, lose to Boston in relatively quick fashion, and the fallout's going to be, well, they won a playoff series again. And remember 2015, XJ? Remember how bad that was? I mean, the announcing crew was already getting out in front of it. And to me, honestly, XJ, if I'm a Knicks fan, the most disgusting 2 words I could hear right now are year 0. They were talking. Breen and Alan Hahn were talking about it. Breen and Alan Hahn were talking about it in the game before the Blazers game. Like I always tell Knicks fans, remember this is just year 0. This is the start. This is the start of opening a window.
Hold on, I don't remember hearing this. Did they use the phrase year
they
0?
They didn't say year 0.
God,
but
I mean, me.
Yeah, no, they didn't say that. But they did. They did basically do the implication of this is year 0.
Yeah,
and it's just. To me, that's painful to me because where is this idea that they're going to like grow and evolve and learn and assuming nothing else changes, like assuming they win a playoff series and then they lose in round 2 and then next off season, what's going to change? What is going to change? They're going to evolve. The chemistry is going to grow. They need more than 2,000 possessions this starting lineup needs a full off season too, to keep learning these principles. And I don't see it. I also found, actually, to your point about the lineups and do you know that in this time, these 12 games that Brunson's missed, the 5-man unit of Deuce McBride, Landry Shamet, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns has played 0 minutes together.
We don't need to see what the 5-out spacing looks like, Jeff.
That should be
viable.
That should be impossible. That should actually be impossible. Just by accidentally playing a possession together, like just stumbling upon it, like what that thing that we always joke about offline where the Deuce starting lineup plays a possession and then Tibbs is like, that's enough. Get back out there, Josh. That's he sees a possession of it. And then just that should accidentally occur, but it just hasn't. These guys, there are things that they're doing in terms of building an offense and scheming. They've even infused that fun Lakers set where they run the split action off the ball and it leads to some backdoor cuts. They've put in some really cool plays, but until they fully embrace the strengths of this roster with Jalen Brunson, this is both a good and a bad thing for the Knicks. We haven't and we won't see the best of this team. And we can keep leaning on that. That's a good thing. That's like a really good thing. On one hand, you know, they get to round 2 this year, continuing to play as we've seen them, and they lose to Boston, and the outside non-Knicks fans are like, oh, you guys thought this team would be good. You thought this team had championship potential. I think if you're a Knicks fan, you can be like, dude, we haven't even seen the best version of this team. But then the glass half full side is like, if changes aren't made, why should we have any optimism that we're going to see the best version of this team? So it's just sort of a there's upside and there's downside, and it's just one of those things where we got to wait and see what decisions the Knicks made. But as we said at the top of this episode, this is just a big fork in the road when Brunson returns, and there are different avenues for them to pursue. And how they react to this, what they learn from these non-Brunson minutes, what lineups they deploy, what strengths they emphasize, these are things that are going to define their season.
Yeah, I think that's all extremely well said. And I think that you're touching on, Geoff, like why maybe people believe we sort of often sound so negative, quote unquote. But I think
the word you're looking for is miserable. Actually, miserable would be the word you're looking for.
Yeah, that's probably the most precise word to use there, I think, for various reasons. But I think, like, and in my line of work in particular, we spend so much time in particular with problem identification. And the reason for that is if you can't accurately identify the problem, then you can't identify an effective solution. And if you identify the Knicks problem as not enough possessions together, then your solution is going to be, just run it back and have them keep running it out there, and they'll learn and just keep plugging away, keep pushing it, keep doing the same thing over and over again. And eventually with enough time, they'll get to where we expect them to go, or we'll just realize later on that the problem is different. And to me, I spend so much time in my mind identifying what the problem is. And if you're not winning a championship, there's always some sort of problem. And that's how I view things. So if you're winning the championship, then there's probably still some sort of problem, but it wasn't enough to stop you from winning. And if you're not, then there's some sort of problem that's preventing that from happening. So for the Knicks, I'm just continually trying to identify the problem and identify it accurately, because then you can know what the most effective solution will be. And if you think the problem is they don't have enough talent, despite the evidence that we're seeing to the contrary, then that's going to lead you down a road of completely different solutions. You're going to say, well, the only way forward is to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. You got to trade Towns and get a better guy in here. And that's the only way, because we know they don't have enough talent. Or if you say, like I mentioned, well, they haven't had enough time. They've only had one season. Actually, they've had 0 seasons. This is a year 0. They haven't had enough time. They just need another season and another season and another season. Look at the Boston Celtics. It took them four years together to be able to figure it out. If you identify those things as the problem, I just think you're going to be solving the wrong thing, and you won't be able to solve towards the goal of winning a championship. And in my opinion, the problem is none of those things, but rather deployment. As we've been talking about from very early on with this Knicks team, we had not talked about it as though it was a problem. We talked about it in the beginning of the season. We talked about it as though it's something to watch out for and to know that it could be a problem. And then, to me, that's been shown as evident, as demonstrably the case. And so if that is the issue, either you need to do something with coaching, or you need to make a trade to change the the way that the team is structured so that it can be deployed to the maximal and optimal ability of whatever the team construction looks like. But those trades don't look very likely at this point because of the Knicks cap situation and because of their asset depletion situation. And the age group that this team is in gives them about, in my opinion, a 3 to 4 year window, including this year, including year zero. So I just think that I think that, you know, that's critical to the situation. And so I think hopefully that really helps explain why it seems like, well, this seems very negative, but it's or miserable, but it's not negative or miserable. It is saying, what is the problem? What is preventing us from reaching our goal, eventual goal? And if you can't identify that correctly, it's all for naught. And unfortunately, you know, I just don't want to see the Knicks go in that direction. So as you said, as sad as it is to say, maybe it is better if they lose in the first round to what would be a horrible loss to the Milwaukee Bucks without Damian Lillard. That might be better for the future of the team. So I don't know.
I just want to say, you guys, if you want to see comedy or live crash outs or whatever word the kids are using these days, let's sort for the range of outcomes where the Knicks lose in round one and then no changes are made. And let's just tune into that episode. Tune into the episode at the start of next season where the main narrative is they just need another season after a round one loss to this Bucks team without. And to be clear, this is assuming no Damian Lillard. If Damian Lillard is back, do I think the Knicks still should win? Yes, I think the Knicks still should win. But of course, it's a more respectable opponent where our analysis will change. So I just want to make that very clear. We're talking about this Bucks team that the Knicks saw a couple nights ago that just looked woeful. But I thought, honestly, actually, I thought that was one of the most thought-provoking and wonderful monologues that you've delivered all season. That was perfect about deployment and it was really, really well said and well heard by me.
You deserve the credit
because it really is so just, it's on the nose, and that is what this season is going to come down to. It's not about, this wasn't year zero. This wasn't a year that it could be ignored or could be used for, because there was no development. There have been small glimpses, but there has not been strategic or schematic or tactical anything, any of these, in any of these areas. There has not been long proof that this team is learning or growing or trying new things. And again, I'm going to make the same comment that I made the last time we had this conversation. If this was truly year zero, why is there not been more experimentation? If this is actually the year that doesn't matter because it's year zero, this is the year to try stuff, both tactically and strategically and from a lineup standpoint. So the Knicks surely are not treating this as year zero. They have the answers. That's what we're seeing, is a team that thinks it knows what the best version of this team looks like. You think Tom Thibodeau is saying to himself, oh yeah, this isn't the best version of this team. This is just year zero. You know, this is just, I think he would say something like, we get better every day. And he would give some answer like that, but he definitely is trying to put out the team that he thinks gives them the best chance of winning any game. And to the extent that he emphasizes the long-term values of the team, he is trying to win a championship. That is his ultimate goal, as it should be. But I just, I'm not sure that at the end of the day, the Knicks are going to look back and we're going to look back, and when we analyze in retrospect, say, yep, they did everything they could. And hey, they could prove us wrong. And then we'll come back and say they were right and we were wrong. That's what I think is the most beautiful thing about this show and the environment we're building, is we're trying to learn just like everyone else. So there's definitely going to be things that we're missing. And hopefully, for the sake of Knicks fans, that is the case here.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if we're proven to be off base as to our identification of the problem and thusly the solution, then we'll be the first people on a pod saying, that we were mistaken about that. And I'd be more than happy to do that if it came down to it. the last thing I want to say before we kind of get out of here is just I think that the Knicks, this last stretch of games, and really this has started a few games ago to me, with sort of like 10 to 15 games left in that stretch for a team that has title aspirations, even if it feels like an outside title aspiration. I think that your preparation, your goals, everything that you do needs to be exclusively about preparing for the playoffs. I think there's no more worrying about development or the future in those last cluster of games. I think you play guys who you think are going to help you in the playoffs. You get those guys kind of warmed up and ready to go. That's why I honestly liked Delon Wright playing a bit more. I think he offers excellent defense, still a strong perimeter defender at this point in his career, although he's winding down, and he can play multiple positions. You can get away with playing him 1 through 3. So this is somebody who can support you if there's like a temporary injury in a playoff series. And so I think it's good to see what he has. I think it's good that the Knicks have played the Bucks, and then obviously that is a precursor of what potentially their first round series may look like. And then honestly, the Blazers, I think the Blazers is a good prep game for the playoffs for the Knicks, because again, like I said, they're likely to get the Bucks, and I really think that maybe this sounds blasphemous, but I think Denny Avdia is sort of like a practice squad Giannis to me. Like if you're an NFL team and you're playing, Lamar Jackson that week coming up, and you have Joe Milton, you can run him out there and say, you're going to be the sub for Lamar Jackson this week. Obviously, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he can do the things, and I think Denny Avdia can do a lot of the things as far as his downhill pressure that he puts on the rim constantly. His size is really underrated, and his ability to finish through contact. And so I think you do have to look at that as like, here's getting warmed up for the playoffs. Here's what things will look like. Here's how we're going to deal with this kind of rim pressure threat that we'll see in Giannis, who's going to be heavily utilized, especially if Dame Lillard is out, which it seems to be trending in that direction. So, and then also I think obviously Mitch's health matters a lot in this first round situation, where I believe, I don't know what you think, Geoff, but I think that Mitch and OG is probably the best, or one of the best tandems to guard Giannis in the league, because Mitch can switch on to him and there's really no advantage created in that situation. I think it completely negates to some extent a Giannis Brook screen and roll. Probably doesn't negate Giannis Brook pick and pop, but that being said, I really think that it's a great tandem to be able to defend Giannis. So I think the Knicks are really well suited and set up for this to be their first playoff series, and that's why I think they probably have to win in 4 or 5 games, and probably will. So I know we're a little early to be previewing the playoffs, but what do you think, just given the fact that these are the two teams they played back to back? Giannis himself and Giannis Light and Denny Avdia, and kind of this looking forward as far as this stretch of games being in preparation for the playoffs.
Yeah, first of all, Denny Avdia is awesome. So let's reemphasize that. He's a great basketball player. One other note I want to add to what you're saying about all that, because I truly don't think that there's a team, from its infrastructure to its strategy to the wall it builds, I actually think that the Knicks do arguably the best job of defending Giannis of any team in the NBA. They just, it's strange to watch. You watch him play the Knicks and you sort of wonder, like, how does he crush all these other teams? Why don't they just do what the Knicks are doing, put up this wall? And then you remember it's like, oh, they don't have guys like OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson. For what it's worth, I almost said Mikal Robinson, so that would have been crazy. But the one thing I want to add to that is I think that Klingon specifically was a really, really good test for the Knicks, because I don't know how much we'll see it against the Bucks, because I just don't trust Doc Rivers to deploy whether it's Brook Lopez or whoever the big is, as well as the Blazers deployed Klingon on Josh Hart. But I think that it's like a mix of Klingon is playing the heavy drop that Brook Lopez loves to play. But his deployment and their overall strategy on Hart, at least for 3 quarters, was as close to optimal as I think you'll see. And I think it's definitely something that they're going to see if they play Boston in round 2. And so getting reps against that and seeing that heavy attempted exploitation of a guy who is their best rim protector being put on Josh Hart and basically saying, like, we don't give a shit that you're out here. You can do whatever you want. You can shoot as much as you want. We do not care. We are going to just live with that, and we're going to take what we can with Klingon living at the rim. And what I saw was a guy who was, at least again, up until he got pulled early in the fourth quarter, was monstrously impactful in the defensive end. Just anytime somebody got into the paint, Klingon was there waiting. When Mikal Bridges hit a couple of tough mid-range shots over Klingon, and I'm sure Chauncey Billups was just like, yep, we'll live with that. Well, that's fine. You can take those. And yeah, I think that unless you find answers to those, and those answers are either going to be playing Josh Hart less or having Josh Hart initiate the offense more to punish the guy just ignoring him, you have to find these solutions, or it's going to be really, really tough on the remaining four guys. And I thought that was a big part of how the Knicks fell down 14 points or whatever it was in the third quarter, and they kind of just flipped the script and found some of these solutions. I think these are questions that the Knicks are going to have to answer in almost any playoff series, conveniently except a Bucks series, where again, I just don't know if Doc Rivers is going to, I don't know what he's going to come prepared with, and if he's going to attempt to leverage that specific area. But we've seen it already in multiple Boston games, and I think that it's really, really important that the Knicks keep facing these coverages so that they are best suited to answer that question.
Yeah, I think the coverage was good. I don't think it was optimal, and I also don't think personally, like in my watch of the game, I don't think Klingon was very impactful, honestly. And I watched the game twice, so I watched it live, and then I watched the condensed version of every possessions version on NBA.com this morning. I think Klingon was kind of bad personally. Like, I think he probably had a negative impact on his team. I think the coverage was right at some points, particularly in that third quarter. In the first quarter, they actually played, and it was weird because I didn't remember it this way, but they actually played Josh Hart pretty closely when he had the ball. Like, Klingon was up on him, and that's how they were able to Hart was able to dice up the Blazers defense with his passing because the rim was wide open. They adjusted from that, and then Klingon was just kind of sitting deeper into the paint and played a heavy drop in those situations, and it worked out a lot better. I think overall throughout the game, they didn't do it as well as we'll see another team do, like the Boston Celtics. And I totally agree with you. I think reps with teams doing that in a much better way than even the Blazers did it will be really important for preparation. And they do have a Celtics game on the calendar before the playoffs, so maybe that'll help. We'll see how much Mazzulla shows his hand. You know, the guy is always thinking 10 steps ahead, so I can imagine them not even playing that way against the Knicks in that game to give them a look and give them an opportunity to think about how they would approach it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's important to be able to have that be something that they figure out. I do think it's unfortunate, to bring it back to the miserable negative aspect. I think it's unfortunate for that to be such a big topic of conversation. Like, how do we deal with this? Because it's very easy to deal with. You just either have Josh Hart initiate or you have him off the court. It's very simple in my opinion. So it really shouldn't be the thing of like, what do we do in this situation? And it's kind of taking attention away from other things. But I agree with you, because that Josh Hart is going to be on the court so often, they do have to figure out how to deal with that consistently.
Yeah, I get comments or questions like that on Twitter all the time. Like, why don't they just do X? Or why is your analysis so heavily predicated on this? And it's like, you have to adjust for what the coach is going to do. Yes, there is an ideal world where Josh Hart plays 25 to 30 minutes a game and they have the option to not let the defense exploit them in this way. But that doesn't appear to be an option to the coach. So you can't, I don't know. I think it would be more fruitless to discuss that. Like, we could just spend another episode being like, yeah, just start Deuce and play him more, but they're clearly not going to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think you have to, in that regard, I think you have to try and figure out ways to make that team make the team that's probably going to be on the court the best version that it can be. It's a really interesting overall discussion, though, because it goes back to something I said near the top of the show or near the halfway point, and that's that if this is the way it goes through the rest of the season, will we have ever seen the best version of this team? And I think you and I would both argue that the answer is probably no.
I think that you are right, sir. Totally on the same page about that part. Yeah, we are gonna close it out here. If you are listening to this for the first time and you've made it through the entire episode, please subscribe to this podcast. Like, that's incredible if you made it to this far. Even people who are our biggest fans, as Geoff would say, will typically don't necessarily listen to this point of the show. But if you are, really appreciate having you here. And if you are and you're a subscriber, appreciate your support as always. We will be on again next week. And for Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.